श्री विजय साई रेड्डी, श्री नरेश गुजराल, श्री कपिल सिब्बल, श्री जयराम रमेश। Your name is?
I was going to speak tomorrow.
No, we are there to listen to you, sir.
It is there. Yours is the last name in the list. You will have...
सर मुझे कहा गया था कि मैं कल बोलूंगा सर।
नहीं, यहाँ पर नहीं है, आज ही है। कोई मैसेज आगे बोल रहे।
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, sir. सर, भगवत गीता में कहा गया है, तीसरे अध्याय में भगवान श्री कृष्ण अर्जुन को बोलते हैं, और भूपेंद्र जी आपको याद होगा, स्वधर्मे निधनम श्रेयः परधर्मो भयावह। भगवान श्री कृष्ण को राज्यसभा के बारे में खूब जानकारी हुई होगी। स्वधर्मे निधनम श्रेयः, अपने ही धर्म करके आप मरो वो बेहतर है कि और कोई दूसरे का धर्म निभाओ। हम अपना अभी धर्म निभा रहे हैं, हम जानते हैं इसका नतीजा क्या होगा, पर हमें अपना धर्म निभाना है। और ये जो 4 बिल आए हैं इसका हम जरूर समर्थन करेंगे, पर इस पर बहुत कुछ सवाल भी हैं, और सवाल उठाना उसके लिए तो आर्टिकल 110 का अंकुश नहीं लगाया गया अभी तक। हो सकता है आने वाले दिनों में उस पर भी आप कुछ नया सोच लाएंगे, और सवाल उठाने के लिए भी आप कुछ प्रतिबंध लगाएंगे। इसलिए जब हमारे लिए समय है, ये मौका मैं इस्तेमाल करूंगा इस सवाल उठाने का। Sir, a lot of people have talked about how GST has come into being. Actually, sir, I have been personally associated with this since 1986. I want to tell my friend Derek O'Brien, the idea of GST first came when Mr. VP Singh was the finance minister. Shukhendu Babu may recall. And the first step to reform was MODVAT, Modified Value Added Tax. That came in 1986. Then MODVAT became VAT. Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. Then a committee was set up to look at tax reforms, and the idea of GST came, goods and services tax. And we have reached today the stage where we are going to pass these 4 bills. So it has a long history. And I think the first point I want to make is that successive prime ministers deserve as much credit as the present prime minister. So let us not make it out as if the current prime minister came and suddenly everything worked to the country's advantage. MODVAT came when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister. Indirect tax reform started when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister with the Raja Chalaya committee report. VAT came when Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the prime minister. The idea of GST was first mooted when Mr. Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister. Mr. Jaswant Singh took it forward. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee took it forward. And Mr. Chidambaram took it forward. And now the finishing touches are being given by Mr. Jaitley. So I would be the first to say that Mr. Jaitley deserves one cheer for what he has accomplished. Why I don't give him 2 or 3 cheers is very simple, sir. Mr. Jaitley had 2 advantages that neither Mr. Chidambaram had nor Mr. Pranab Mukherjee had. What are these two advantages? One, Mr. Jaitley did not have a cussed obstructionist standing committee to deal with, which took 28 months to submit its report. And Mr. Jaitley did not have a single-minded obstructionist chief minister to deal with, which Mr. Chidambaram and Mr. Pranab Mukherjee unfortunately had to deal with. So I congratulate Mr. Jaitley, I congratulate the government for being in power when this bill is passed. But please remember that there is a long history to this bill. And I would be failing in my duty if I did not record the enormous contributions made by Dr. Ashim Das Gupta, who was the chairman of the Empowered Committee for many years. Mr. Sushil Modi, the former finance minister of Bihar, who once told me that he was against GST, but 1 year later said there is no alternative to GST. And I admired him for that. And of course, as my friend Derek has pointed out, Dr. Amit Mitra also, the Empowered Committee has played a crucial role in bringing about consensus. And they deserve as much credit as the finance minister does for bringing us to where we are today. So, the GST bill is being passed in a certain economic background. What is this economic background? We are having 7% growth, no doubt. But the economic background is one where investment is still sluggish, where bank credit is not increasing, and where electricity consumption is at a 14-year low. Plant load factor is at a 14-year low. Bank credit not growing, electricity use not growing, freight not increasing, but economy growing by 7%. This is the great paradox of the Indian economic situation. So there are signs to show that the current economic situation needs to be primed up in order to unleash investment sentiment. And perhaps the GST bill is a step in that direction. So, all my previous speakers, including Mr. Digvijay Singh ji and others, have pointed out to the fact that this is not a perfect GST. And I would be the first to say that in a political economy, one tax is impossible. And one tax is undesirable. It's undesirable. So what we have today is two taxes, state GST, central government GST. We have 6 rates ranging from 0 to 28 plus the cess. We have 4 major exemptions: alcohol, electricity, real estate, tobacco. So it's imperfect. We know it's imperfect. But I think it's a very significant step forward. And we should not knock what we have achieved collectively. I think this is a moment for collective celebration, not for any one individual to say, I came and I did and I conquered. That's not the reality of GST, sir. So, we are today embarking into an unknown territory. This GST does not exist anywhere in the world we cannot compare this GST to any GST. There are over 100 countries which have GST. And I hope one day we will stop calling this GST, because increasingly what is G and what is S is becoming very unclear. The distinction between G and S is becoming unclear. And sooner we get rid of this idea of a goods and services tax. It is actually GST, government's single tax. That is what GST is. Or as somebody else said, GST really is good and simple tax. Because what is a good and what is a service in actual practice is becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. So, sir, the GST that we are passing, the bills that we are passing, is unique. We cannot compare this with the GST that exists under different names in different countries of the world. So therefore, the point is, Bhupinder ji, thoda suniye mujhe. When the finance minister
obstructionist parliamentary committee and obstructionist chief minister. I think that is a parliamentary.
No, it's not.
Unparliamentary.
It is not. No.
So you
uncooperative.
Hello, allow me.
If you don't
You
want
allow
to use
me.
the word
You allow me.
obstructionist, uncooperative.
Yes.
I am referring
If
that
it is
word
there, it will be
only-
removed. It will
Only
be
for your
removed.
ruling.
It will be removed.
No, he's substituting.
If it is unparliamentary, it will be removed.
सुनिए, वो obstructionist था,
Jairam
पर अगर
Rameshs
आप उस विरोध कर रहे हैं, uncooperative मान कर चलिए,
Yes.
ठीक है? Uncooperative था.
Jairam Rameshs ji, go ahead.
The deed is
ठीक है.
uncooperative.
Parliamentary acts are more unparliamentary than parliamentary words.
No, don't go. You go ahead with the matter.
Sir, the imperfections of the GST which I pointed out, which every speaker has pointed out, has one implication. The finance minister has repeatedly said for the last 2 years, GDP will increase by 1.5 to 2 percentage points on account of GST. Sir, today I will categorically say, as somebody who knows this subject, GDP cannot increase by 1.5 to 2 percentage points with this GST. Because that number comes from an NCAR report which is based on a single tax, which is based on no exemptions. But what we are passing is something entirely different. So, please let us not use words like revolution, game changer. These are, I think, very, very colorful words. We are taking a significant step forward. We are taking a major step forward. And I'm glad the Honorable Finance Minister has come. And I just want to repeat for his benefit that I congratulated the Finance Minister for bringing us to this occasion that we are today. This is an occasion not for individual credit taking, but for collective celebration, because this idea goes back to Mr. VP Singh's budget of MODVAT. Successive finance ministers, Mr. VP Singh, Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh, Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, Mr. Jaswant Singh, have all occupied the chair that you are now occupying, and they have played a very important role in designing the GST, in creating the consensus that we are celebrating today. And I just was drawing your attention to the fact that even though there are many imperfections in what we have done, it's a significant step forward. But the important point to recognize is that whatever projections had been made about the macroeconomic benefits of GST were based on certain assumptions which are not today holding good in practice, which may hold good in practice a few years from now, and we will get the full benefits of GST as we move along. So, I have a couple of questions on the bill, which I hope the Finance Minister will respond. And these are not small quibbles, but these are basically questions that I have, questions that have been raised in the public discourse, and I'm sure questions that are being thrown at the Finance Minister on a day-to-day basis. So there are 9 rules that have to be, as I understand it, 9 rules that have to be promulgated, out of which 5 rules are done completely and 4 remain. The 4 that remain have got tentative approval, and they will be approved by the GST Council on the 18th of May when it has its meeting. The question that I have is simply this. It is those 4 rules, which include the rules on input tax credit, for example, which are crucial to the implementation of GST, and whether the Finance Minister thinks that the month of June is adequate for the transition to take place into GST as he is anticipating. I just feel that given the uncertainty and given the fact that these rules are still tentative rules, 1 month is maybe too short a period for the full transition to be made. And I would like the Honorable Finance Minister to reassure us that this is not going to be a game stopper and that GST would actually be unveiled as he's been saying on the 1st of July. So there is a second concern that has been raised, and these concerns have been raised
रमेश जी,
by service companies.
अभी कितना मिनट बोलेंगे?
Sir, मुझे और 10-12 मिनट चाहिए sir.
मैं पूछ रहा हूँ.
I'm sorry sir, don't hurry me.
I am not hurrying. I am asking you.
No, first of all, I was to speak tomorrow. You advanced my slot today. So please bear with me for 10 minutes. I'll try to finish earlier.
Thank you.
I'll try to finish
Go
earlier.
ahead.
I'll finish before the Deputy Chairman comes so that he doesn't have to ring the bell, so don't worry. So my second point, my second concern, and this is a concern that has been raised by service companies, banking, insurance, telecom, IT, e-commerce. The fear is that they will have to register with 29 states. Now, is this fear justified? Is this fear legitimate? It seems to me prima facie that their concerns are not exaggerated. That contrary to what Mr. Sancheti was trying to project to us, it's not one registration, but it is 29 registrations if you have to do business in 29 states. Of course, the option is always available. If you don't want to do business in the Northeast, you don't register, which is perhaps what might end up happening. So I'd like the Honorable Finance Minister to... हाँ बोलिए.
मैंने ये कहा कि आज जहां हमको 15 से 17 जगह जाना पड़ता है, उसकी जगह एक जगह जाना पड़ेगा. चाहे एक स्टेट में आज 15-17 जगह जाना है तो फिर एक जगह जाना है. I mean to say this only.
So this 29 registrations is a reality, and I think the Finance Minister must reassure us what is the roadmap for getting out of this situation in which we find ourselves. So the third point is a point that Mr. Naresh Agarwal raised, is what happens to local bodies. Now this is a very important point. Sanjay Raut ji is not here. Bombay Municipal Corporation last year, the budget was 38,000 crores, out of which octroi collection was 8,000 crores. Now, I'm sure the answer will be, well, we are compensating the states, and it is up to the states to compensate the local bodies. Sir, I think we need a little more clarity on this issue. And I say this because our experience with the state finance commissions has not been uniformly positive. If we are depending on the state finance commissions to actually devolve resources to panchayats and nagarpalikas, in some states the SFCs have worked, in some states the SFCs have not worked. And I would like the Honorable Finance Minister to address this issue of local body finances. Now, sir, the 14th Finance Commission, which is sort of a Bible as far as this government is concerned, you accepted the recommendation of the 14th Finance Commission of 42% tax devolution. You accepted a recommendation of the 14th Finance Commission which it did not make, which is to abolish the distinction between special category and non-special category states. But the 14th Finance Commission also said something on local bodies in the context of GST, which you have not followed. One, what the 14th Finance Commission said is that please examine Article 276 of the Constitution, which the Finance Minister knows very well because he and I have sparred on this in this very house last year. Article 276 allows for taxes on income, on profession, a professions tax. And today over 21 states have used the professions tax to raise resources. In fact, the Maharashtra EGS in the 70s was started by having a tax on professions under Article 276. Now, Article 276, as the Finance Minister very well knows, is the only article in the Constitution which has a number. There is a ceiling of 2,500 rupees. And the 14th Finance Commission had made it. Yeah, we know the background to that. But the 14th Finance Commission had made a recommendation that this 2,500 rupees ceiling should be increased to 12,000 rupees and the states should be allowed to raise resources not only for the states but also for the local bodies. Now, Kerala and Tamil Nadu are two states which have used Article 276 to raise resources for urban and rural local bodies. So, given the fact that there is this big uncertainty on the impact of finances on local bodies, I would like the Honorable Finance Minister to please enlighten us on what the options are available going into future, not as part of this bill, but as part of the process of strengthening local body finances, which would enter into a regime of uncertainty. And I would like to invite his specific attention to para 9.97 of the report of the 14th Finance Commission, which has recommended an increase in the ceiling in Article 276 in order to provide states an alternative source of revenue for local bodies both in rural and urban areas. Sir, the one clause in this entire bill which has caused a lot of worry is the clause on anti-profiteering. And I want to talk about that. It is clause 171. 171(1) in bracket uses the word shall. Clause 171 in bracket 2 uses the word may. Now, sir, the first paragraph, the first clause is that a company shall reduce prices so that the consumer gets the benefit of lower rates. And the second part of the clause says government may constitute an anti-profiteering body which will determine whether unjust enrichment has accrued to the company or not. Sir, with the greatest of respect, with the greatest of respect, no economist has been able to come up with a formula of what determines unjust enrichment. Prices can fall, prices can increase, market factors both domestically and internationally can change. But what you are telling the company is that if taxes fall, your prices shall fall. And I am going to determine whether you have actually complied with this or not. I'm in sympathy with this because our track record in the last decades is that companies do not pass on the benefit of tax relief. Intellectually, I'm in sympathy with what you're doing, but in practical tax administration terms, sir, this is one more point of harassment. And I am surprised that a modern, liberal, open-minded finance minister has given his support to the introduction of this bill. This is almost as he was not here when I spoke on the finance bill, section 132 of the finance bill. I could not believe that a man who called Vodafone tax terrorism would actually introduce section 132 in the finance bill. Similarly, I can't imagine that a modern, liberal, open-minded finance minister would have introduced a clause which says if the tax rates fall, you shall reduce your prices, and to make sure that you reduce your prices, I am going to set up an authority or I am going to refer it to the Competition Commission as the case may be. I am not moving any amendment on this because, as I said, there are both sides, but this is a deeply troublesome clause. It has created a lot of fear, as I said, because the tax administration does not have, for a variety of reasons, a reputation for either efficiency or for customer friendliness. That may change in future, but I would like the Honorable Finance Minister, when he replies, to specifically take us into confidence as to how this clause 171 will actually work itself in practice and how he will make sure that clause 171 works according to rules that are set by the GST Council. As long as it is working along to rules set by the GST Council, I think the fears can be addressed. Sir, I have one question on compensation. And this is a legitimate question. Maybe I've read the bill wrong. The cess is being created to compensate the states. One of the components of the cess is a 400 rupee per ton cess on coal. Sir, if I remember right, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, when he was finance minister in 2010, first introduced 50 rupees a ton cess on coal. That was increased by Mr. Jaitley in his first budget to 100 rupees. Then Mr. Jaitley increased it in his second budget to 200 rupees. And in his third budget in 2016, if my memory serves me right, 200 became 400. The question I have is, if you are saying that the compensation fund is going to have revenues coming from this 400 rupees a ton cess on coal, does this mean that the National Clean Energy Fund stands abolished? Does this mean that the 54,000 crores that is available to you in the last 6 years by collection of the cess, that would come into this compensation fund, or that would be part of the consolidated fund? What I am not able to understand is whether 400 rupees becomes 800 rupees, or the 400 rupees remains 400, but the purpose of that is no longer clean energy, no longer climate change, no longer environment, no longer renewable, but now it is compensation to the states for GST. Sir, I had assured the Vice Chairman that I will finish before you came to ring the bell. Unfortunately, sir, bear with me for 2 minutes. I'll finish in 2 minutes. I'll finish in 2 minutes. So I'll finish in 2 minutes. So on this compensation aspect, I would like some clarity on what happens to the 400 rupees a ton cess that you yourself had created last year. Finally, sir, I have one suggestion.
Keep it there.
And the suggestion for the Honorable Finance Minister's consideration is this. The GST Council has been created by constitutional amendment. It's a unique experiment. The states are ceding sovereignty. Central government, center is ceding some sovereignty. So the GST Council is a unique experiment. The GST Council requires full-time, independent, professional expertise. It cannot depend on the central government Ministry of Finance. It cannot depend on the state government. My earnest plea to the Finance Minister, set up an independent, professional body that will be the Secretariat for the GST Council. And let that body have an arm's length relationship with the center, and let it have an arm's length relationship with the states. And that body, of course, it should have the revenue service officers, it should have economists, it should have lawyers, and it should have chartered accountants. And just as you have created a GSTN for managing the IT backbone of GST, I think, please think about a similar organization for providing the economic, the financial, and the legal underpinning for the implementation of the bills that we are passing. Otherwise, sir, the GST Council, I'm afraid, is either going to become an extension of the government in power at the center, or is going to be an extension of a few finance ministers who understand economics, who understand law, and who understand finance. So in summary, sir, I think we have taken a huge step forward with the passage of the GST bills. This is a moment for collective celebration. No one individual can stand out and say that I am responsible, but we should also be realistic of what will happen. It is not as if suddenly Khulja Simsim has happened. There are a lot of pitfalls, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of hard work that lies ahead of us. So rather than scoring points with each other, I think what we should do is try to work in a spirit of cooperation to address some of the issues that are bound to come up in the implementation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jairam Ramesh. Okay, thank you. Now the